Hello and welcome to the special edition of Footcast Social. This week, we touch upon an important topic, the growth of women's football. And to talk more in detail, we are joined by two exceptionally talented media personalities from both sides of Atlantic. Catherine Bate, who joins us from London, and Semra Hunter, who's the official La Liga presenter, who joins us from Spain. Semra, first we go to you. Welcome to the show. Our first question has to be on the most dominating team, the Barcelona women's team. They've had some splendid run. If you look at their last 30 games, they've won all, scored 159 goals and conceded only 11. What do you think of them?
I assume you're talking about the women's team because the men's team is going through a period of transition, but the women's team is phenomenal. They're a joy to watch. They're exceptionally good. And I think they're one of the best teams and maybe will become one of the best teams to go down in history. They absolutely are terrorizing so many different clubs here in Spain on a domestic level. They've really been impressive at a European level. Unfortunately, whenever they came up against Olympique Lyonnais, it was just too much for them in the final. And so it still seems as though there's a way for them to go to really officially kind of pronounce themselves as a heavyweight here in Europe, but they are on the right path. They are a team that has so much talent. They do take a lot of pride in Barcelona in bringing players through the system and trying to build a first team that is predominantly of these players that have come through the academy. And they only just bring in a few players, mostly in attack, from abroad, who really can add a lot of depth and an extra dimension to this team. And they really have turned things up a notch this season. They've won a treble. They could have won a quadruple. Unfortunately for them, it didn't happen. But they're scoring records amounts of goals. They've won records amounts of games, as you said, in the league. They were undefeated this season. It's never happened before. So it's really exciting to see what the future holds for them and where they go from here.
Last 2 years have been brilliant for women's football. What do you think? Pandemic has had a positive impact on the game?
I'm not sure what way you mean, but I suppose you could say, the good news is that we've come out of the pandemic and people, or at least we're still coming out of the pandemic in Spain anyway. And it seems as though a lot of people really didn't have a hunger and a thirst to go to women's football. And it's been, I can't remember exactly, 1999. So it's been 23 years since the last time there was a world record attendance. And it was broken here in a span of 2 weeks. And both times at the Camp Nou. The first time was Barca against Real Madrid. The second time was Barca against Wolfsburg. And they had more than 91,000 people in attendance. So that's huge. And I think we're starting to see that a lot more people really do want to partake in women's football, both by playing, also by supporting. And we're even seeing in England, for example, with the Euros coming up next month, they've already sold out a record number of tickets for a lot of these games. England games, for example, at Wembley, all three of them have already been sold out. So there's lots of positive signs of the interest and the growth behind the sport over here in Europe, which has taken a long time to catch up to what was going on in the United States. Maybe I think COVID was a little bit more of a setback because it was kind of starting to go on this exponential growth, at least in Spain, a couple of years ago. And I think there was a concern that this hiatus, by stopping things, that it would put a little bit of a dent in the plan and the development. But actually, it's thankfully gone really, really well since people have been allowed to come out of their homes, allowed to attend football matches again. And so we'll see what happens next season. They've made this league now professional. This past season was the first time that it's happened here in Spain. So we're only seeing a lot of ways in which the sport can now be accessible. They're selling, in the midst of selling the TV rights, radio rights. So they're trying to give it a lot more visibility and a lot more exposure as well. So we can only imagine that there will be a lot more people investing in so many different ways in women's football here in Spain.
Women's football is incomplete without Gurinder Chadda's Bend It Like Beckham's mention. What are your memories of the movie and of the game while growing up?
Oh, I absolutely love that film. I would watch it again today. It's one of my favorite films when I was growing up. I'm from the States originally, I'm from Los Angeles. And so I grew up playing football. It was my sport. I remember kicking a ball the first time when I was about 3 years old, and that was it. It was love at first sight. So for me, that movie meant a lot to me because it made me feel like, you know what, I can do this. I can be a professional football player. And that was what I really wanted to do when I was growing up. That was my number one aim and perspective and goal. It didn't happen in the end, but here I am still working in football in a different way as a broadcaster now. But I remember that movie so incredibly well about breaking down barriers, and it was huge at the time. And I think so many of us as little girls, my friends, we used to watch it all the time. We used to cite that movie. We used to want to watch it because it inspired us, it motivated us, and made us believe that we could do things. It was a great movie and made a huge impact on us, and I think it still does today. It's still very relevant today, 20 years later or however long it's been.
Well, sports is incomplete without fans. What are your views about the sudden resurgence of fans, especially at a time when the ticket prices are going up?
Well, I think maybe the pandemic had something to do with it, with all of us being locked inside for so long and having our freedoms limited in terms of what we could do, what we couldn't do. And people love sport. You know, all over the world, people love sport. And so I think now we've had this sort of reaction to where we can go outside again, we can go have fun again, we can spend our money again. And so a lot of people want to go to football, especially in Spain. It's a religion here, especially for people who support their local clubs. And, you know, it's not just Real Madrid or Barcelona. There's so many different clubs here in Spain in the first division, the second division, the lower leagues, and they do get a lot of support and they get a lot of people who do want to go to those games. So I think it's really nice to see people going out again, in full force, returning to the games and really turning up for these teams. And I think the players really miss the fans a lot. They've really needed them because the quality of the football dipped at a time whenever nobody was in the ground. And it was a bit strange. I think even for them, they felt like it was a training match. There was nobody there to inject some energy into some passion and emotion into the matches. So it's been brilliant. It's been brilliant. We've absolutely missed the fans loads. And so I'm really so pleased to see the return of the fans this past season. It's been great.
Well, the fans come with all kinds of thoughts and emotions. You as a woman in football have also faced some irate fans. How did you manage to tackle them?
I mean, listen, I think being a woman in football is a really difficult thing, especially when people are not used to it. And historically, it's been an industry that's been dominated by men. And I think we're seeing in a lot of different countries and a lot of different cultures and societies that this is now starting to change. And that doesn't mean that only women are affected by this. Everybody is. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, if you're a presenter, a reporter, a commentator, everybody receives abuse. And it's really a problem. And I think the wider problem stems from society. And so how we fix it, honestly, I don't know. It's a really difficult thing to fix. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the world who are angry, who are upset, who, whatever the reason may be, and they feel that going on social media and just targeting somebody is a release. It's a way for them to vent some of their anger, some of their frustrations, even if it has nothing to do with you personally. It's just a way for them to take out their own personal issues on somebody else. And that's the thing. I think in person, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily do these kinds of things, but they feel safe doing so on social media as though they're protected behind their screens. Even now, we are starting to see that is now crossing into a physical realm. We are seeing journalists getting abused and harassed in a physical way as well. And it's a huge problem. I think all we're trying to do is do our job. We're trying to do it the best we possibly can, to be informative, to be insightful, to be knowledgeable. And unfortunately, sometimes, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, it just doesn't matter. People are going to attack you. And so it can be very difficult to deal with. There's no question about it. A lot of us face depression, face anxiety, face stress. And a lot of us need to find ways to deal with it. And I do think a lot of people are now starting to turn to maybe therapists, psychologists, trying to look after their mental health because it's so important to do so and to find tools and ways to protect yourself and to become immune to the abuse and the harassment that we receive. Because unfortunately, I don't know if it's going to go away. I don't know if it's going to go away. I don't know if it will disappear, if it's going to get better, if it's going to get worse. But it is a huge problem. And maybe the first step is by talking about it, like you and I are doing right now, bringing awareness to the situation and trying to find solutions collectively about how we can treat each other better. So I can only hope that we do find a way to do that, because like I say, so many of us are working really hard to just do a good job. And unfortunately, sometimes just because you are a woman or just because whatever, people just don't see it that way and will attack you for it.
You've become a strong figure with your stance and your work. How do you react to the fans who've started admiring you and started following you in hordes?
No, to be honest. No, I didn't realize that. I hope I can give a lot of encouragement and strength to those girls and other women, to other people in general who do want to follow my path or something similar into the industry. Because it can be difficult. Even for me, sometimes it can be really difficult to find the strength. And there are times when I felt really, really upset and really hurt about these kinds of things and the things that are said to me. So it takes a lot of work, definitely a lot of strength and digging really, really deep to find a way to say, you know what, I don't deserve this. I haven't done anything to deserve this. It's not about me. It's about the other person that is saying this stuff to me. And you find a way to kind of, protect yourself from that. So I hope people can find strength in that.
What is the approach you take in the work that you do, Semra?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think it has to do necessarily with being a male or female. I think at the end of the day, we're human and we have emotions. Of course, these things affect us. There's no question about it. But you're right. I think it does make me stronger, and it does make me say, you know what, I'm going to work that much harder. Like you said, I'm going to work that much harder to prove myself, to be professional, to do the very best that I can, whether people like it or not. Because at the end of the day, I want to feel good about what I'm doing, and I want to feel proud about the work that I'm doing, you know? And so I think it is really important to take stock. Sometimes some of the comments maybe are actually, there can be positive criticism in a way, or constructive criticism would be the way to say it. And you can sometimes take feedback from people, say, oh, you know what, I didn't think about that. Or maybe it's better to say it this way. Or you can learn from things. But whenever they are just straight out abuse, harassment, and so on, you do have to learn to just say, you know what, completely ignore it. It has nothing to do with you. So yes, I think at the end of the day, we do have to work that much harder to prove ourselves. And hopefully there will come a time where we don't necessarily have to do that.
Well, Semra, for the benefit of the viewers and the fans who are watching you now, what is the kind of preparation that goes before an El Clasico match or a Champions League final?
Well, for me, La Liga is basically 24/7. I don't really switch off from it during the season. I'm always on social media or on newspaper sites or trying to find out ways how I can get the best information possible about all of the teams, because we cover all 20 teams in the first division. So I need to really know what's going on with everybody pretty much at all times. So even when I'm not at work, if I'm at home or whatever, I'll pretty much always be on my phone trying to stay up to the latest, to date with the latest information. So a lot of the times, the information I already have in my head. But most of the times I'll go through, I'll see what the games are. I'll do my research on each individual game, try to figure out who might be featuring in a starting 11. So at least I have something roughly prepared. See what some of the interesting storylines are, maybe see what some of the interesting statistics are about a given game or about a particular player or manager or something like that. So I always try to find really interesting ways of talking about the game and seeing if I can add something a little bit additional to it. Because at the end of the day, I really like being a storyteller. I like to tell stories. I like things that are a little bit beyond just what we see on the pitch in terms of the football and the way that we analyze it and the tactics, which I also very much enjoy. But I think there's so much around football as well in Spain and with these teams and individuals that it's really interesting to talk about as well. So I basically just do that. I go through everything, see what is the most important or relevant to talk about on the day.
Another fan question for you. What has been the best story that you've covered, and what has been the funniest of them all as a storyteller?
Funniest story? Off the top of my head, I don't know if I can think of the absolute funniest that I've had, but one of the funniest is in the studio. I work with a lot of really great guests, and yes, a few of them are ex-football players themselves or managers. And because we have such a good relationship, we can have fun. And we can make jokes. A lot of the times we do make a lot of jokes with each other. And so we can create a really nice environment. So we have old footage of a lot of these players because, you know, we work for La Liga. So we have access to a lot of things from the past. And so just for fun, sometimes we'll bring up, an own goal and poke fun of them, or, some of the mistakes that they made on a football pitch or whatever, just to have kind of a laugh and things like that, to break the moods or to break the ice a little bit, and just to have a little bit more of a relaxed atmosphere. So it's not always just about the games or current, or kind of, like the current situation in La Liga. We can also poke a lot of fun to those that have played in the past here in Spain.
Well, Samra, this is a fan question yet again. Do you make mistakes on air? And if yes, how do you cover them up?
Actually, no, thankfully it hasn't happened. I think we've come close a few times where maybe we do have a lot of laughter before shows start. Like I said, because we have such a nice working relationship with basically everybody that comes through those doors into the studio, that a lot of times it's really hard for us to kind of get into the zone and concentrate a little bit, because we're laughing about whatever it is on the day. But once the mic and the camera switch on, everybody's pretty much focused. And so, no, nothing like that's happened.
In your entire career, who's been the most difficult player to interview on air?
The most difficult player to interview? I think no one, really. At least in my experience, everyone's been brilliant. Everyone's been great. They've been very easy to talk to. They've been very forthcoming in their answers. No one's ever really given me a hard time. No, honestly, I've never had any bad experiences interviewing anybody.
Well, Samra, thank you very much for answering all the fan questions. It's been a real pleasure hosting you. Now we move on to London, where Catherine Bate has been patiently waiting to answer all the fan questions. Over to you, Catherine. Catherine, welcome to the show. We start off by asking, what do you think about the fan protests that are emerging in outrage against the club owners?
Yeah, I mean, they're understandable. I think we saw a lot in the Premier League last season because of the European Super League, which obviously was not accepted. Manchester United are a club that have had a lot of fan protests recently at the club's owners. We saw them at Arsenal and Chelsea as well. So it is something that's, obviously on the rise a little bit. I think fans are of the opinion that they have to stand up against their club owners, when they're not happy with the situation. And with something like the European Super League, obviously it worked. It was they stood up against something that they felt was unjust, and eventually the club's owners did back down. But I think we've got an independent review of football in the UK going on currently, and I think they have decided that an independent regulator is needed, and it'll be interesting to see the effects of that and what impact that will have in terms of fans having more of a say, and as you mentioned, obviously being on club boards, and whether that is something that will become mandatory going forward.
Now let's talk about the good things. The fans have started turning up for the women's football, and we saw a game with 90,000 odd fans. Does that give you great hope for women's football?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was growing up watching women's football, I could never have imagined something like 90,000 people watching a women's football game. It's brilliant to see, and obviously Barcelona, I think, have done a great job in marketing their women's team. They're obviously a fantastic team to watch. I think people enjoy watching them. And obviously the men's team aren't doing as well at the minute, and the women's team are kind of carrying the hopes of Champions League football this season. So it's great to see, and hopefully we can kind of see that across the women's game in other countries as well.
Well, it's another fan question. Movies like Bend It Like Beckham had a great impact on women's football. Do you think Gurinder Chadda's movie had great impact on you personally?
Gurinder Chadda's Bend It Like Beckham had a massive impact on the growth of women's football in the early stages. It put it on the big screen where it hadn't been before. The story was brilliant, and it was accurate in terms of players being able to play professionally in America but not elsewhere. Something which has changed over time, and it really kind of as I say, put women's football at the forefront of the big screen. And I think it's had a massive impact on the growth of the women's game.
What are your personal memories of the movie? You would have been very young then.
Yeah, I was quite young when I first watched it. I loved David Beckham, so I was drawn in by the title of the film. And then obviously I realised that it was about women's football, not about men's football, which was great. And you go out in the garden after you watch it and try and practice the free kicks and stuff like that. And Yeah, I've watched it recently as well, and you forget little parts of the film from when you were younger, and you remember them when you watch them again. But a brilliant film, and as I say, it had a huge impact on the growth of the women's game.
Now let's talk about more concerning issues on Manchester United. Do you think Erik ten Hag would do the justice to the team?
Well, I mean, obviously we know Erik ten Hag is coming into Manchester United, and I think for Man United that's a move that just has to work out, because they've missed out on Pochettino before. They opted not to go for Conte. They've plumped on Erik ten Hag, and they've put their money on him. So it really has to work out now. It's been so many years since they won a trophy, and obviously Conte will be under pressure at Tottenham next year to get them higher up the table. Klopp and Guardiola aren't going anywhere, and they've set the tone for the last few years. So, the coaches around them have to compete. It's going to be a big year for Mikel Arteta as well. I mean, he has to build on what he's already achieved this season. So, Erik ten Hag coming in has a big job on his hands.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine, for informative and insightful view on women's football. Well, that was Footcast Social with me, Sunil Yashkalra. Keep watching NewsX.
I think both Frank Lampard and Wayne Rooney walked into difficult situations. Rooney at Derby, it was always going to be up against it with the ownership issues that they've had, lack of players, not knowing what's happening, and the points deduction as well. Obviously, if they'd not had the points deduction, they'd have stayed up this season probably. Frank Lampard went into Everton when they were on a very bad run as well, and he just has to try and really keep them up this season and then look to build next year. But keeping Everton up this season is going to be very tricky, and if he fails to do that, it will be quite tough for him to, as to where he goes next if he fails at Everton.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.